Hello and welcome to BlueTube, where we talk all things blue, and this is the much-awaited live stream. Hello, everybody. There's Andre Davis. Hello, I see you there. First viewer. Congratulations. Today we're going to be basically doing a preseason overview, as the title shows, just talking about all the games that happened so far this preseason, talking about what kind of formations Antonio Conte messed around with, what players that he seems to like, what players he seems to not like, and what we think of our general team going into the season. So firstly, I'll first introduce my guest. Say hello.
Hello everyone, Chelsea Transfers here. Of course, you'll find my channel in the description below. And yeah, I'm happy to be on with BlueTube, and yeah, let's go
And
from
just
here.
give a brief description of what you do on your channel.
Well, on my channel, I'm more oriented around transfer news, although all in all, I just do Blues talk, and I've been following the preseason extensively as well. So I thought, we could come together and speak about overall preseason.
Yes, so guys, if you're interested in Chelsea, which most of you probably are if you're on my channel, be sure to go check him out. He'll be linked in the description down below. But without further ado, let's get straight into our very first game of preseason, which was against SK Rapid Wien. And we actually started off with a 2-0 loss. Goals coming in from Joelinton in the 8th minute and Tommy in the 82nd minute. Not the best way to start off the preseason. Do you have any specific thoughts on that game?
I think that we were just quite unfit, and I know that this is kind of like a common thing to throw up when you lose a preseason match. It's just preseason, players aren't match fit, but we had a lot of players not back because of the Euros, and not just that, we had a lot of unfit players as well. Of course, the team we were playing had already started their preseason, so I think they had a slight fitness advantage on us. And I think overall, Chelsea were just a little bit off the pace. But of course, Conte also came from the Euros, so there was a little bit of chemistry issues with Chelsea and Conte. I don't think he had enough time to put his tactics across to the players. So really, I don't think that we were expecting to see a brilliant performance from Chelsea. Of course, it was disappointing to see a loss in our first preseason game, but I don't think it was completely unexpected, and I don't think we can take too much from it.
Yeah, and I also think you have to consider that we didn't have a lot of our main players back because a lot of them played in the Euros. Most of them were on the holidays, so we're playing with players like Djilabodji and like Jonathan Mikel in our first team. But one player that I want to talk about from that game was Branislav Ivanovic. Like as usual, I put my faith in him throughout the season, and I always stuck up for him, despite what a lot of commenters say. But he didn't really prove his worth in that game. And I feel like it was just a repeat of last season. And I just want to hear your thoughts on Ivanovic.
Ivanovic is a difficult one for me because I don't really want to bash the player too much because, look, he's certainly one of the last remaining players from Chelsea's great team. Of course, Terry's seeming to be on the way out as well. And I don't really want to criticise him too harshly, but it certainly seems like he's coming to the end of his Chelsea career. I think it's very worth noting that we brought him in as a centre-back, and he was, of course, converted to the right-back position. I think now he certainly could maybe prolong his retirement by being pushed back into that centre-back role, because we're looking at him being caught out a lot because of his pace and position and sense, and I think that's something we see from players whose legs start to go. But I think we could see that being compensated for if you play a centre back. Like if you put John Terry out at right back, you're going to see him get destroyed week in, week out. He's just not suited for that role anymore. So if we were to play Ivanovic more central, I think he could definitely compensate with his lacking abilities. But really, I don't see his future right back for Chelsea at all, in my opinion.
Okay, well, you said something interesting there, because in my videos, I've been saying that I think we should push Ivanovic back into the center-back role. And in the comments, we can see Andre Davis saying his first thing that he said was, we need a new center-back. Do you think we need a new center-back, or would you be happy with just having Terry, Ivanovic, Cahill, and Zuma in our center-back positions?
Well, you see, we've already saw Papi Djilabodji get sold to Sunderland a few days ago, and it looks as if Conte, he's also came out with a few comments regarding Matt Miazga and says that, essentially Miazga needs match time, and he didn't directly say that he wasn't going to get that at Chelsea, but he's been hinting that Miazga might go out on loan.
Yeah.
So this we're quite depleted in that area, and we've been conceding quite a few goals in our preseason matches. So I think certainly defense is an area we need to strengthen in above all, for me, definitely.
But then would you invest in a center back, or would you invest in a full back? Or where would you play Ivanovic? You said center, right?
Yeah, we have quite a few versatile players who can come in at right back. We've seen Aina play either wing. We've seen Cesar Azpilicueta play either wing. Cuadrado is more obviously an attacking player, but he has played right wing back for Colombia. And if Conte wants to play a three at the back system, I think Cuadrado could be utilised in that right wing back role. He's done it before. So we do have versatile players who could fill in at right back if necessary. But in answer to your should we buy a centre back or full back question, I think we do need both. But it really depends on what system Conte wants to play going forward. I think, like I said, we need both. Primarily, we need a centre back. Zouma is still coming back from injury. John Terry's reported to be playing under this new rule, so we don't know how much play time he's actually going to get. So far, he's played a lot, but I think that might just be because we've got limited options. So really, I just feel like because we've got a very aging back line, and then the players that aren't aging are quite youthful, we don't really have that middle ground, that 25-year-old centre back who's experienced and in his prime. And I think that's who we need to really target and bring in this summer.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because one of the things I've been saying on my channel is that I don't think we need to buy a new center back. And my main reasons for that was because we're not playing in Europe this season. So there's not that much of a fixture kind of pile up. And secondly, we have Andreas Christensen out on loan, who we're almost definitely going to bring back next season. And I think he's a really exciting player. And what I think could be great is Ivanovic is, I think, 99.9% going to leave next year. Because, the fans just don't like him very much. So if he does leave, Christensen can kind of fill in his boots. And John Terry, is he going to leave or is he going to stay? We don't really know. But if John Terry leaves as well, then we can bring in another center back like Mustafi or Koulibaly or whoever we want. And I think that could be a good transition next season if we're back in Europe, of course.
But how long would you like to wait? Like we saw last season, we were quite shaky at the back, and even preseason, like I said before, we've been conceding a few goals, and I just feel like it's a better to be safe than sorry. I mean, I'm sure this is something we're going to get into later, but we're seeing some quite heavy links to Lukaku and stuff, and really crazy price tags being banded around. And for me, I just feel like if we're going to overpay for one position, it's got to be somewhere in that defense, whether it's fullback or centre back. We need someone in that defensive line if we're going to overpay for someone. That's who we need to be going for. My opinion.
Okay. Well, I think in our preseason, we've conceded a lot of goals, especially even in yesterday's game against Werder Bremen, we conceded 2 goals, and we looked quite shaky near the end.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I think mainly our defensive vulnerabilities are caused by just the overall team sloppiness, and a lot of our mistakes comes from the midfield, actually, like especially in Nemanja Matic. I don't think he is kind of back to his best yet, especially this preseason. And in my eyes, the Chelsea defense isn't actually that bad itself. Maybe like the right back area, Ola Aina still looking a little bit naive, and Ivanovic is Ivanovic. But other than that, I feel our defense is pretty solid. But we'll talk more about that as we get on to the next games.
Okay.
So the next game that we played was against RZ Pellets, and we kept our first clean sheet of the preseason in a 3-0 victory. And that was when Michy Batshuayi played his very first game. And we actually started, I should have mentioned this, by the way, against Rapid Vienna. Rapid Vienna, we played a 4-2-3-1 formation. But now against RZ Pellets, we played a 4-2-4 formation. In your eyes, what do you think is the better formation for us?
I think Conte, in his first press conference, he was asked about the 3 at the back formation, and he said that he wanted to more fit the players than anything else. And I think over the first 2 games, especially, we kind of saw that he was tinkering with a few things, with a few ideas. And I'm sure we're going to speak about this later. Even towards the end, he's been trying new formations. So I'm not sure if he himself knows the best formation. For me, you see, formations are really dependent on who you're playing, I think. We can get away with an attacking formation like a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-4 if we're playing a lower caliber team, no disrespect to whoever we might be playing. But whenever we're coming up against a top European club, for instance, or even just a top 4 club, I'm not sure if we can get away with something like that. And I think that's something we saw when we played Real Madrid later on in pre-season. We played the 4-2-4 formation and we kind of got outplayed in midfield. So I think it's quite dangerous. It's good that Conte isn't a stuck character with one formation, which a lot of the press were branding him as this type of manager that's going to stick to one set system. It seems as if he's not that. But it seemed as if our second game, Conte was just more or less, tinkering with what he thought was best. And I suppose by the evidence of the results, you could say that the second game went a lot better. But in saying that, players were fitter and he got more time with them. So what's your opinion?
Well, I think before the season started, I've been predicting Conte to play a 4-4-2 formation, and that's the formation I've been basing all my transfer videos on and all our transfer targets on. But watching this preseason, I feel like we play a lot better in a 4-2-3-1 formation just because the players are so much more used to it because we've been playing with a one striker formation for a long, long time now. And just the way Chelsea play, I feel having that additional player in midfield, in the center of the midfield, is much more beneficial than having a striker up top, just because we like to pass it around a lot and we don't, whip in a lot of crosses in the game. So I don't think having the second striker could be the best choice. But something that Ben Andrews from Chelsea TV said during yesterday's game was we can play a 4-2-3-1 at home where we have that more defensive solidity with the second defensive midfielder. But we can play a 4-2-4 when going away. I mean, sorry, the other way around. We can play a 4-2-4 at home. Sorry. Because we'll have more confidence from the crowd. But a 4-2-3-1 going away when we want to kind of defend ourselves a bit more and we're against tougher opponents. So I think that kind of versatility could be good as well.
Yeah, and I think something that's worth noting as well is modern defenders aren't really used to defending against two strikers. They're used to targeting one man and the whole defense kind of smothering that guy, but they're not really used to two strikers. So I think playing two up front could be quite interesting to see from Chelsea, especially when we have two contrasting strikers in a target man and Diego Costa and a more pacey get in behind Traore or Michy Batshuayi. And I think that's something we almost saw with Italy whenever Conte played Pele and Edgar, I think, up front. So I think that's worth noting as well.
Okay, well, one question I have for you is, if we were to play a 4-4-2 formation with two strikers, do you think we need to buy another striker before this window closes?
You see, this is interesting because we have it looks as if Costa's set to stay, so he's our main man. So I'm happy we're keeping him. Is Michy enough? He's looked very bright in our preseason, but at the same time he hasn't scored yet, which is slightly worrying for me. Because the longer that goes on, the more just it worries me. Quite frankly, Traore's looked bright as usual, but I just feel as if he's not really that top caliber player that we can rely on week in, week out. It's difficult because we've got versatile players in Traore and in Kennedy who we haven't seen feature basically at all during preseason, who can come into that striker role and do a shift. For me, I think it all depends on Hazard. If he can contribute enough goals, I think we can get away with the strikers we have now. And so far, he's looked bright. So it'll be a risk, but it's a risk we could take, in my opinion.
I didn't hear there. It depends on who?
It depends on if Hazard gets the goals.
Hazard. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hazard's been really bright this preseason, actually. Yeah, we'll talk more about him in the games where he has featured. But something that I think is, if we are going to play with two strikers, even though we're not in Europe, so we have less games and less important games, you could say, I feel a bit unsure about Batshuayi. And before he signed for us, I made a transfer wish list video, and I said we should sign two strikers. One, a world-class striker, I suggested Aubameyang, and a second striker who's gonna just be the substitute striker who can come in maybe in the last 30 minutes to change a game. And that was Michy Batshuayi. And we actually ended up signing him, but we never signed that top quality world-class striker. And so far this preseason, as you said, Batshuayi still hasn't scored. But the thing is, he's actually gotten into a lot of really, really good positions to score. He's had about like 3 or 4 one-on-one situations, which he's all missed. And yeah, his finishing he looks very unconfident is what I felt watching him. So I'm still a bit unsure about him. I'm not sure.
I think it's just we're gonna need to wait and see for him to score his first goal, and I feel like once he gets that first goal under his belt, the rest will flow.
Hopefully that's what happens. One of the people in the comment section, Andrew Davis, once again, he said we should get Gabigol, and he is the young Brazilian striker. I think he plays for Santos.
Yeah, Santos. Yeah.
Do you think if we are going to get a striker, we should go for someone like Gabigol, who's young, inexperienced, and like not proven in Europe, or we should go for someone more expensive, more experienced, with more guaranteed quality?
I think it worries me, the gulf in class between our targets. We have the very high caliber Morata, Lukaku, and then we drop all the way down to Gabigol, and that's no disrespect to him, but there's going to be a really big transition from Brazilian league. Whereas Lukaku is a proven Premier League goal scorer, and Morata's done it in Juventus, Real Madrid, and the Euros. Gabigol for me is too similar to players we already have. He's too similar to Kennedy, too similar to Traore. I'm not saying he wouldn't be great. He might come in and be a complete sensation, but I just don't feel like he's gonna give us something we don't already have. And he doesn't seem to be like the type of like the type of player Chelsea tend to put their faith in. So I'm not sure if that would come off. For me, I'd much rather we move for someone more prolific and high profile. But the problem with that is they're just not available.
Yeah, that would be the same thing for me. They're not available. Like I'd love to have someone like maybe Lacazette or Griezmann or Lewandowski in our side, but they're just not leaving.
Yeah,
What
but
do you think of Lacazette actually? Because he's playing for Lyon. He's played there for a while. He's a lot, no disrespect to Lyon, but he's a lot better than Lyon in a sense. But he's just gonna stay there.
yeah, he seems to be slightly similar to Batshuayi, and Batshuayi actually didn't quite meet Lacazette's goal tally, but they were quite close in terms of goals last season. And I feel like they're quite similar in types of players. Like, is Lacazette going to play every single week, and will that halt Michy's progress? I wouldn't be opposed to us moving for a player like Lacazette, but I feel like we kind of maybe need players slightly better than Lacazette, and I wouldn't mind overpaying for a player and more suited to Conte's system, because I don't think he wants two players that are too similar in that sense, in my opinion.
Okay, but then here's my question to you.
Mm.
Who better than Lacazette?
Sorry, you cut off there. Did you say, is Lukaku better than Lacazette?
For some reason, you could just repeat the last thing.
Yeah. Sorry, you cut off as well. What was your question? Is Lukaku better than Lacazette?
Yeah.
Lukaku is more prolific, I'd argue, and he's primarily proven. His first touch is absolutely horrific, and he's certainly a lot of poor attributes to his game. But in saying that, he scores goals. What is it, like 50 goals in his Premier League career so far, or something along those lines? He's been very prolific, and we know he'll get goals. I'm not the biggest fan of Lukaku. Okay, although I do think that if we could get him for a reasonable price tag, and when I say reasonable, I mean between the 50 and maybe 60 million mark, but that would even make me feel uncomfortable. I feel like that's worth considering over Lacazette, in my opinion.
Okay, what about 75 million pounds?
No, not a chance. It frustrates me so much that Chelsea didn't just insert a buyback clause, because that would have just dilemma.
Yeah, especially you're seeing Morata move back to Real Madrid for such a cheap price, and then we're chasing Lukaku for 75 million pounds. It makes no sense to me, but it is what it is.
Completely. I mean, I feel like any top club that's selling any player that has any potential needs to just insert a buyback clause, no matter what. I think that just makes complete business sense,
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. Our next game, we kept a second consecutive clean sheet. It was a game against Liverpool. It was actually quite a dull game. We ended up just winning 1-0 from a header by Gary Cahill from a corner early on in the game. Any specific thoughts on that game?
Well, I remember two things. I remember being very, very tired because it was on very late at night. And I remember the referee, because he absolutely killed the game for me. Every 2 seconds, he's blown his whistle for fantastic tackles as well. I remember Cahill put in a great tackle. Aina puts in a great tackle. It was horrific. Of course, we got the victory. And I think we saw a very good defensive showing from Conte as well, especially when we went down to 10 men later on. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a second. But I think really we saw the more tactician mind. Klopp just kind of, it seemed like he told Liverpool to just press, but it seemed like Conte kind of had a little bit more tactical mind in a sense. But all in all, the referee just slowed it down far too much to really take too much analysis from the game, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm just reading the match stats on the Chelsea website. I'm just going to read you like two of the statistics. Number one, possession. Chelsea at 35% of the ball, Liverpool at 65% of the ball. And attempts on target, both teams had only one shot on target throughout the entire game. That seems very Mourinho-like to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do actually. I remember thinking to myself, Chelsea seemed to be dropping off an awful lot in this game, and I thought that was a little bit of a dangerous move when you're playing a team like Liverpool that like to press up high. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Begovic was still in goal for us by this stage, and neither goalkeeper really seemed to be ball players, like Hugo Lloris or David De Gea. But anyways, I just didn't really feel comfortable with us dropping back so deep and allowing Liverpool to press. And I feel like we were playing quite an attacking formation in that game as well. So it didn't really make sense for us to be dropping so deep, so regular against a team that we knew were going to press up tight against us. But in saying that, you've just read out the stats, one shot on target. We seem to contain them pretty well. So I guess the Chelsea players did their job right.
I guess, yeah. And in the end, all that matters is the scoreline. But still,
Yeah.
and I'd like to see us kind of come out a bit more, be a bit more adventurous. And I think we saw that later on in the preseason. But when we did become more, open, we became more open. We conceded more goals and we made more silly mistakes. And yeah, one thing that was interesting, really interesting to watch in this game was Ruben Loftus-Cheek played as a striker. What are
Mm.
your thoughts on that?
I kind of feel sorry for Ruben Loftus-Cheek because I mean, like, he's desperate to get into the Chelsea team, and he finally gets a manager that seems to like him, and he's played completely out of position. I mean, Loftus-Cheek, for me, I actually prefer him sitting a little bit deeper. And people have criticised his defensive play, but for me, I think he makes a really good tackle. His mental seems to be a little bit off in the sense that sometimes he switches off and isn't in the right positions, and maybe his work rate's a little poor. But I feel like this is something that can be changed with the right manager and with the right team around him. And I feel like playing him up front, maybe if Chelsea were a smaller club or if they had more time in their hands, they could develop him into that role. But realistically, he only really had 2 or 3 games during preseason to convert into a world-class striker. Otherwise, he's just not going to get into that team. So I didn't really understand it. I didn't think he played poor considering, but he still wasn't up to the level of a Chelsea striker. And it just didn't make any sense for me for us to be playing him up front when we have a player like Kennedy, who I think could have done much better. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very confused when I first saw it. I was like, this is a mistake, right? But then I heard Antonio Conte actually said before the game started, that he's going to experiment with Ruben Loftus-Cheek as a striker. And just to see him there, I was very kind of disappointed in Conte and in Ruben Loftus-Cheek, because I don't think Loftus-Cheek, he had probably like 2 touches in that first half of the ball. And then Conte just kept playing him. He didn't move him back. He just left him there and I didn't really understand it. I don't think he should play the striker, as you said. He's much better suited to the central midfield role. So I hope to see him play in the midfield role in the future.
Of course, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Just a random question here from Classic One. He said, what do you think of our youth goalkeepers like Jamal Blackman and the Polish guy we signed who will be our future goalkeeper? Do you know who he's talking about? The Polish guy? I'm
I
not
do
too sure.
actually. I don't know if I should even attempt to try and pronounce his name. I think it's Bulka or something along those lines. He's only 17. So,
Oh,
he's looking quite a far away in the future. He came from the Polish academy. He trained with Chelsea around April time, and they were impressed. Apparently, they fought the likes of Barcelona off his signature. So there must be, he was quite highly rated. But in saying that, I think this is one very much for the future, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him eventually go out on loan. But I don't think that should deter Chelsea fans too much, because we saw Courtois go out on loan to Atletico, and of course, eventually get recalled. So one for the future. As for Blackman, I don't know. I can't see him breaking through anytime soon. Can you?
not really, especially with we have such good substitute goalkeepers as well in Begovic, and we're rumored to get another goalkeeper in like Diego Lopez maybe.
Yeah.
So I don't think Jamal Blackman is going to get that opportunity. I actually personally, I haven't watched him a lot, but whenever I have seen him play for Chelsea or some like academy highlights, he doesn't seem like that good, in my opinion, to be blunt.
Yeah, well, I think it's also quite easy to secure goalkeepers, because I think once you have your starting number one, it's quite easy to tie them down to the club for the next. Goalkeepers have very long careers, as we know.
Yeah.
And as when you're talking about substitute goalkeepers, all you want to do is basically sign a veteran goalkeeper, like Diego Lopez, like you just said, and they're good on the bench for a couple of years. They're fine to just take the pay packets, and then we know that we've got those experienced hands to come on if needed. So I feel like youthful goalkeepers just aren't really going to get their opportunities unless they're really highly rated. So.
Okay. Yeah. So that was just a random detour off the Liverpool game. I don't think there's really anything else to talk about in the Liverpool game. It was a pretty dull game. Not
Yeah,
a
it was.
lot going forward for both teams. But I think one thing we could say is Chelsea defensively were actually quite good. As you said, we contained them very well. They only had 1 shot on target. So maybe in the future, if we have a really, really important game and we have a 1-0 lead, it shows that we do have the ability to be able to defend that lead for 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Our next game was against Real Madrid in the Champions Cup, and that was our second loss of this preseason, and it was a 3-2 loss. Any thoughts?
God, that was terrible. Well, firstly, Marcelo, absolutely destroyed all of the
Mm.
progress made with Aina. Aina got just like a complete rinsing on Twitter. I went on Twitter and he was trending, and people were just, the next Ivanovic, get him out of the team, etc. But Marcelo had an absolutely fantastic game. Chelsea were completely out of the game after about 20 minutes, and just all in all, I mean, I thought that we really got put back in our place. It seemed like I felt like we made a lot of progress up until that game, and then Real Madrid just showed us that we still have a long way to go. And of course, we did end up getting 2 goals back, but I think it's very worth noting that this was against Real Madrid's essentially their B team, because a bunch of kids came on at about 60 minutes, and that's when we started scoring the goals. And on top of that, when all the kids came on for Real Madrid, our main players like Hazard came on, so we got better and they got worse. So I don't think there's a lot of praise to be had for Chelsea. What's your opinions?
Yeah, the thing with in this game, as you said, Marcelo was really, really good. He scored 2 of their goals, one in the 19th minute, one in the 26th minute, and then Mariano, a youngster who I'd never heard of, scored in the 37th minute. And a lot of one of the goals, Marcelo's second goal was a deflection. Mariano's goal was just a crazy long shot, and I felt like there's nothing we can do in those kind of situations where if you concede off a deflection or anything like that. And I thought it was quite a shame because I was hoping for us to give them a good game, but then by halftime they were 3-0 up, and it just felt the game was over. So it kind of sucked for me.
I think maybe Begovic could have done a little bit better with that long shot, although it was slightly moving in the air. But I think one thing we certainly learned is if we're going to spend 70 million on a Real Madrid player, it's not going to be Morata, it's going to be Marcelo, and we're going to put him up front for sure.
Marcelo. Speaking of fullbacks, you mentioned Ola Aina there, and he's a very young, inexperienced fullback, and he just got played by like the experienced Marcelo, who's had an incredible career. Do you have enough faith in Ola Aina to be playing him in the first team regularly throughout this season, or would you keep him as a sub and play someone like Ivanovic or a new signing ahead of him?
Well, I think Aina is certainly ready to be a rotation player in the sense that I think he could come in and do a good shift. I think it's worth noting that Aina performed very well up until that point, and I don't think he's now has to be condemned by any means. I just think that he might not be best against the top quality players. So if we're playing, top bottom half teams in the Premier League, of course, I think we will see that. Like you said, we may not have European football, but we do have. Ivanovic is going to need a rest at some stage, so I think Aina certainly can do it for sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with you there, but I would just feel a lot more secure having another fullback, maybe someone like Baba Rahman if we hadn't sent him out on loan, just to cover for him. And then in this game, you mentioned Eden Hazard. He scored 2 goals for us. I think this was his first game back, I think. He scored in the 80th minute and in the 90th minute. And something that I remember from this game was Michy Batshuayi had a really good chance. He was one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and then he missed. And I know we talked about Batshuayi before, but just a question. How long do you think it will be before he gets his first goal?
It depends how much. Of course, I feel like that was a really good opportunity, and he just slowed the defender enough time to come back and but it's just really going to depend on how much playtime he gets. It depends also on whether Conte uses him as in striker 2 or just the one man up front. But he certainly looked sharp. I think he looked very sharp. So
yeah, he gets into a lot of good positions. He makes a lot of good runs. Just the finishing, hopefully that improves when the season kicks off. Anything else you want to comment about the Real Madrid game?
The Real Madrid goalkeeper was very poor. I think both of Hazard. I don't think that there was a lot of praise or positive statistics. At least it kind of showed Conte that he needs to adjust formations and players, I think.
And actually, I know this is just a preseason game, but it's Chelsea, Real Madrid, and they're at least one of the top teams in Europe at the moment. And we're not in the Champions League obviously this season. But how competitive do you think Chelsea are in Europe right now, or like in the last kind of 2 or 3 seasons?
You want me to analyze the last couple of seasons we've been in the Champions League?
Yeah, just generally, like compared to teams because now it's just dominated by Bayern, Atletico, Real, Barca, and all the English teams are getting pushed out. And how competitive do you think we still are?
Well, I think a couple of years ago, we were almost quite naive. I remember we drew PSG when Jose Mourinho was manager, and quite a few people were saying, "Oh, well, we're going to just beat PSG," and we took that quite naively, and I feel like we kind of put ourselves a little higher than we maybe should have. I think for quite a brief bit we were around Atletico Madrid level, Juventus level, but those clubs have surpassed us because they've progressed, and I think we have went backwards. And it's going to take a lot of rebuilding, although I am confident that Conte's the guy to do it. I think now we just need to concentrate on getting in the top 4 next season and take it from there.
Okay. Another thing that happened this game was Cuadrado made his entrance at Chelsea, and also Pedro played a role as well. And someone in the comments was asking earlier on, who do you think is better, Pedro or Cuadrado?
They're both similar age, actually. They come to the end of their career. I think, firstly, the best attribute a player can have, in my opinion, is momentum, and I think that's what makes a player like Jamie Vardy. So I think Cuadrado has a lot more momentum going into this season, coming off the bat of winning the title with Juventus last year, than Pedro does. He had a very kind of inconsistent. One game was very good, one game wasn't so good for Chelsea. So I think, for me, Cuadrado on his day is better than Pedro on his day, even though Pedro has a lot of pedigree. I think that can't be mistaken. But for me, Pedro might be more of a consistent player.
Pedro, okay. But generally this preseason, Cuadrado, I've been quite impressed with Cuadrado actually, and he was a lot better than as I expected. And I was wondering, because in terms of our wingers, we have Eden Hazard, Willian, Cuadrado, Pedro, and Kennedy. And I thought Kennedy would be staying in the beginning of the season. So I was wondering who to sell between Pedro and Cuadrado, but it seems Kennedy will be going out on loan, which will make room for these guys. And it'll be interesting to see how much game time they get actually throughout the season.
What about Moses? Do you think he'll stay or go?
Sorry, who?
Victor Moses.
Oh, actually, yeah. I always forget to mention Moses for some reason because
and he's been like our best winger as well.
yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you, like in the first game, in like the first 2 games, he was like our star man. And he always is in preseason, but then he just gets forgotten for some reason. What do you think of him?
I think sometimes, well, this might sound a little bit harsh because I completely agree with you. Victor Moses has been really, really good, and last preseason as well. But I think he can slightly look a little bit better when we see players like Willian playing very poorly and putting passes in terrible positions. And last season, Hazard came back overweight. And whenever you have a player like Moses, he seems to be completely fit. He seems to be match sharp. It can maybe slightly cast a little bit of disillusion on how good Moses actually is. But in saying that, he has certainly been very, very good. I think he looks good enough to get in that Chelsea team. But one, quick thing to note is he did go out and loan West Ham, and he didn't really play as good as we thought he might have after last season's preseason. So by that logic, maybe we didn't make the wrong decision loaning him out. But then again, maybe playing around players like the players Chelsea have in their squad could rise them to a new level. So it's very debatable.
And so if you were Conte, would you send him out on loan or not?
You see, I probably tend to lean more towards FIFA and sell everyone and bring in everyone else, and be completely unrealistic. Speaking realistically, I think you'd have to loan him out. In an ideal world, I'd probably keep him, sell Pedro. I'd even consider selling Willian, as hated as that might get me in the comment section.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, and I'll give you my reason for that. I think Willian had a sensational season last year, but I think he really compensated for Hazard, and I think Hazard's coming back into play now. And I think we could command a really good fee for Willian at the moment. And I think if we move for a player like Mahrez could contribute a lot more goals than Willian could. And I feel like we could actually make a profit on a deal like that. But I don't think that's absolutely realistic whatsoever. So it's very hypothetical. But in answer to your initial question, I think Moses will go out on loan. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I would send Victor Moses on loan, especially when we have like Pedro, Cuadrado, Hazard, and Willian. And just let's talk about Willian a little bit more, because some of the commenters, Alexander and Barclay and Andrew Davis, are talking about Willian. I think Willian last season, as he was our player of the season, and he was sensational. But of course, as you said, he was compensating for Hazard's lack of form. But I still think Willian brings, because it's very rare to find someone who's that fast and that strong. And especially in counterattacks, you can see that when he just like skips past like 3 or 4 players easily, and he can just he's very strong that way. And
Yeah.
I would still have Willian in my first team personally, but I know a lot of people have been disappointed with this preseason, and especially his game against Real Madrid. There were a lot of people on Twitter saying, what is he doing? So I just want to hear some more thoughts on Willian's preseason.
Well, I think it's very worth noting here that firstly, of course, he was on preseason with Brazil, even though they did get knocked out very prematurely. But I think the most important thing to take from all of this is Willian is, in my opinion, most certainly suffering from burnout, because he really was Chelsea's star man all year round and was, head and shoulders above everyone else on the pitch. You can't keep that type of consistency without dipping at some stage. I think it's better that he's dipping now during preseason than during the actual season, but it doesn't surprise me that he's not at the levels of last season, especially when he was so much better than everyone else.
To be fair, though, I think Willian, he was sensational in the first half of last season, but he started dropping off in the second half. It was kind of like Cesc Fabregas' first season here.
Yeah, I agree.
So hopefully, he can kind of pick it back up when the season starts. But I do think he was quite positive in the other games, like against AC Milan and against Werder Bremen. I thought Willian was quite good.
Yeah, I agree.
And you actually mentioned Mahrez there, and he's someone that I really admire. But just seeing him in the Community Shield last night, actually, he was very, very disappointing, and he barely he made no impact in the game, I thought. And should we just talk about the Community Shield for a bit, or just move on?
No, we can talk about it if you want. I must admit, I was recording a video when it was playing. I watched the highlights, so I didn't see the entire game. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's just move on.
All right.
So we just did the Real Madrid game. AC Milan, yes, second game in the US, or was it the second? Yeah, or third game in the US actually. We won 3-1 with goals from Bertrand Traore and 2 from Oscar, and Milan's goal coming from a free kick, I think, from Bonaventura. A really good free kick.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that game?
My thoughts were Donnarumma. I don't know who's coaching them, but they're stupid because they kept passing it out from the back, and it's all good and well doing that whenever the option's open, but they did it every single time, and it took about 2 attempts for Chelsea to suss it and just completely push up tight. And I really thought that they gave up all the momentum they had, because they started the game quite strongly. There was a few good saves made from Chelsea, but I think they gave away their momentum as soon as they started doing that, and Chelsea just got straight back into the game. Of course, we did see some transfer rumors around Oscar possibly linking him a way out, and wouldn't you know it, as soon as Oscar gets linked out, he starts performing, and he popped up with a couple of goals. So all in all, it was quite mixed emotions, but it was good to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, it was. I just want to focus on Oscar a little bit. As you said, lots of speculation surrounding him, and I feel like Chelsea fans are very divided on Oscar. Some of them really want him to stay, others really want him to leave. I'm like somewhere in the middle. I want him to stay, but at the same time, he hasn't been that consistent for us in his time here, and he's just not that reliable of a player, I think. So if you were Conte, would you sell him or would you keep him for this season?
I would sell the inconsistent Oscar and I would keep the consistent Oscar, but unfortunately that's not possible. So for me, look, I've got to compare him here, and I've got to compare him to other playmakers in the Premier League. I look at players, maybe not so much as David Silva, but certainly players like Coutinho. And I just feel as if Oscar's not that caliber. And no disrespect to Liverpool, I don't want to get myself completely hated on this channel, but I think Chelsea are above Liverpool in terms of standard. And I just feel like it's all good and well putting your faith in Oscar, but it's not like he hasn't had the opportunity to prove himself. Like, yes, of course, he might be more suited to Conte's role in the centre mid, but I feel like his time is really up now. I don't think Chelsea should sell him on the cheap, but if an offer comes in that's sufficient, get him out and bring in a player like Draxler, who's open to moving away this summer. He's admitted that, or just someone who we can put more faith in, because Oscar's just too inconsistent for me, even if he pops up with a great performance here, there, and everywhere.
Okay, and how much money do you think we could get off of Oscar, especially in today's market when prices are just going crazy?
Well, we saw a deal. We saw an offer come in from a Chinese club, I think last January, and it was reported like 57 million or something. Although
but that's China.
Yeah, but I mean, do Chelsea really care if the money comes in? Of course, Oscar's moving away to China. But I think it really depends on firstly, the club's in for them, and secondly, where Chelsea stand in terms of negotiations. Like, as soon as Chelsea admit that they want to sell Oscar, you can take 10 million off the price tag. As soon as there's no clubs in for Oscar, you can take another 5 million off. So if we see a club actually come in for Oscar, then you could be talking maybe 25, 30 million. But if no one's in for Oscar and Chelsea are looking to ship him out, we might have to part with him for as little as 20 million.
I think that would be a shame though, because I think he's a really, really good player, and it's easy to forget he's only 24 years old. He's still got a big future out of him. He still hasn't hit that prime age yet. So the part of me that sees him as inconsistent and not that reliable wants him to go. But at the same time, I feel like imagine we do let him go, and then he becomes like a complete star at Juventus or at Inter, and
I'll
then
tell
it
you,
becomes like a Lukaku.
Insert a buyback clause.
Yes, if we do sell him, we should definitely put in a buyback clause. That'd be their number one thing to do.
Well, here's a question for you. Would you take Juan Mata back? Of course, there's been a lot of questions about.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think we could get him very cheaply, and I think I haven't always been the biggest fan of Mata, but at the same time, for getting him for such a cut price, and I feel like he's still got a couple of, or maybe even more than a couple of top level games left in him. Bring him in on the cheap, and then make a profit on Oscar. I'd be open for something like that.
Did you just say you haven't been a fan of Mata? Get out of this channel, man. Get out of this channel. No, Mata, when he was at Chelsea, he was like probably my favorite player at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Something's ringing. Okay. And I would definitely take him back. But the thing is he going to fit Conte's system? Because he's similar to Mourinho in that he likes that defensive kind of player. And Oscar, one thing that's really good about Oscar and a really underrated skill that he has is he probably is the best tackler in our team. Even with the defenders, he's probably a better tackler than half our defenders. And I think having that kind of player in the center of the park, just snatching the ball off of midfielders, is a really, really good player to have.
I think we can compensate for that though in players like Kante, because I think Kante does brilliantly, and we don't want we want one main man, which we've got in Kante, to sweep up. We want one main playmaker, which we've got in Fabregas. And we want two players who can come in for either of those two and do a decent job. And we have that in Matic to come in for Kante, and we have that in Oscar to come in with Fabregas. But it's just about having that depth, I feel. I feel like we need better replacements for Kante and Fabregas if one of those need to be rotated. And Matic and Oscar, for me, both are too inconsistent.
And just going back to Juan Mata, actually, in the Community Shield, I don't know if they showed this in the highlights, but Juan Mata came on in around the 60th minute. And then Mourinho subbed him back off in the 90th minute. That was really confusing to see. And maybe, we can get a really, really good deal on him. But do you think Manchester United would sell him back to us for a loss, especially because they bought him for like £37 million, right?
Yeah, well, actually, Everton were reported to be in for Mata earlier on the season for around 20 million, which was quite low. But in saying that, I think United would be actually open to selling back to Chelsea, but I can guarantee it won't happen because Jose Mourinho will stand in the way. We've seen it done before where he stood in the way of players moving out because he doesn't want to strengthen opponents. Of course, Peter Cech, that was just Abramovich letting Peter Cech go. That wasn't Mourinho's decision at all. And I feel like he will completely block this move. There's no way Mata will be going back to Chelsea in Mourinho's eyes. I think he just has it in for Mata in general, to be honest.
He just wants to ruin his career. I feel quite sad for Mata, actually, because I feel like he could be a really, really good player, especially maybe in La Liga, where it's less physical, where it's more about the passing, more about like pretty football. But then he's stuck at United on the bench where he's not going to get any time.
Yeah, I think he could strive in a lot of leagues, even for Borussia Dortmund maybe, or a team like that.
Yeah. Something that I want to talk about, and you briefly mentioned this, was about just our midfielders. Throughout this preseason, in the center of the park, we've seen Matic, we've seen Conte, we've seen Fabregas, we've seen Oscar, we've seen Chalobah. But if you play a 4-2-4 formation, we're going to only have two positions open. Who would be your preferred two? And I think you said Fabregas and Conte, actually, but would you be sticking to those two?
Well, I think firstly, it really depends on who we're playing. But for the most part, yeah, it would be Kante and Fabregas. We need the creativity there that the Fabregas gives, and we need the energy that and defensive mindedness that I think Kante gives. So yeah, that'd be my two.
What have your thoughts been on Chalobah through this preseason?
I think it would be very. Kante and Chaloba had a very brief outing together. I think that would be a very interesting partnership, between them two. He's looked very bright. I'm not actually a great advocate of being deluded with youth and wanting 10 players to come through at once, because it's very easy to say, well, this player should come through and this player should come through, but realistically, we can't do that. We've got to pick main ones. And I feel like a lot of our youth aren't ready, but from this preseason, we know Loftus-Cheek's ready. I think Aina looks ready, and I think Chaloba really does look like a rotation player. He doesn't maybe look like he's got the experience to start week in, week out, but I think he could be used as a rotation player for sure.
Okay. Just touching on like young players and bringing them through. Previously, you do transfer rumors on your channel, so you would have heard this. We've been rumored with the youngster Stanchu, who's actually not that, like 23 years old, I think, and Thiago Maia, the Brazilian. And in my channel, I said, we shouldn't bring them. They're, it's completely pointless. We have great players. And I got a lot of hate from a lot of people saying that, these guys are great players. They have great potential. They're going to break through and be the next Messi. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they might break through if we weren't Chelsea, but you know what's going to happen. We'd bring them in and we loan them straight back out again. I think the Romanian guy, I'm not going to try pronouncing his name. Funny enough, I was just watching his highlights. Of course, highlights make everyone look good. But but really, he does look like a good talent, and the price tag is only banded to be around 6.3 million, so that's pretty cheap. But I think he's more of a number 10, and the system Conte plays, whatever variable, it doesn't seem to like there's a number 10 involved. And unless he's going to be playing him out in the wings, I don't see how he's going to get into that team. And like you said earlier, we already have way too many wingers at the club, in my opinion. So unless we bring him in to loan him straight back out, can't see him getting into Chelsea, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I want to briefly touch on kind of our loan policy, and I'm probably going to make a separate video on this later on for like 30 minutes because I have a lot to say on this. And this has nothing to do with preseason. But, we buy all these players and then we loan them out. And I think last season we had over 40 players out on loan. And it sounds ridiculous. But then if you think about it, the other side of the coin is that, we bought Djilabodji for like, what, 2.6 million pounds to 4 million pounds-ish. We sold him for 8 million pounds. And all these youngsters who we loan out, we eventually, like 90% of the time, do make a profit on them. So what would your thoughts be on our loan policy, considering the business side of football?
I think people seem to get quite angry because there's a few no disrespect to Chelsea fans, new Chelsea fans that see Chelsea signing a player and automatically assume that he's coming into the team that might not follow Chelsea as extensively as people as me and you, and know that they're just going straight out and loan. But really, I think that it's a business, and I know that that's a phrase I'm personally quite sick of hearing, but that's just the way it is. But in saying that, I think what angers me the most is just when we see players like Lukaku go out and loan and know that they would be good enough for the Chelsea team, and they just get blatantly sold for profit. And I don't think we made that much in Lukaku, actually. I think we bought him for around 20 million and sold him for 28. So really, that's not that big of a return for a guy that we're talking about buying back for 70 million. But for me, I don't think it's a bad policy we've got, because like you said, we're making profits on it, but I just think Chelsea should be a little bit more careful on who they go, and at least just insert a buyback clause. We've said it like 3 times, but it's just makes so much business sense for me.
Yeah, and it's also really frustrating to see players with huge potential like Lucas Piazon in the past, or Josh McEachran, who was meant to be the next Lampard, and players like Patrick Bamford, and there's still players, a lot of young players right now like Nathan Ake, who could be playing for us, but he's out on loan. And that just frustrates me about our loan policy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Before we move on, there's a comment from Humberto Bacon who says, "I am a Real Zaragoza fan. I dare you to name a single one of their players. I will name you 10 of their players. Cani, Manuel Lanzarote Bruno, Alex Barrera, Razvan Popa, Xavi Irureta." And I am not reading that off Google, definitely. So moving on. What are we talking about? AC Milan. Is there anything else to talk about AC Milan? I think we've exhausted that topic.
Yeah.
That brings us on to our final game of this preseason. That was the game against Werder Bremen, which just happened last night, just before the Community Shield kicked off. And we won that game 4-2 with early goals coming from Hazard and Oscar, and then a goal by Pizarro to make it 3-1. Then Costa at minute 45 to make it 3-1 going into the half. and then a goal by Lennart Thai making it 3-2, and Pedro in the 90th minute to give us the 4-2 win. What are your general thoughts on that?
My general thoughts would be Diego Costa kind of looked a little bit off the pace of things in comparison to other players, but I think something that I realized today above any other preseason game is Costa offers us something quite a lot different to our other strikers, and that's I don't really see Costa getting caught offside nearly as much as any of the other strikers. And on top of that, he's very prolific in front of goal. He's a good finisher, and when you combine those two attributes, you get a really good striker on your hands. And I think maybe Costa doesn't always look as elegant as a Michi or as peaceful as a Traore, but really, I think that he's very valuable to Chelsea's team, even if he didn't look like he played brilliantly today. And I think the other really big main talking point is a lot of our, or both of our goals, even though one was a penalty, of course, the danger came through central areas. We saw Branislav Ivanovic come back in on that right side, but he didn't actually have too bad of a time, which is which is unusual. We actually saw the danger funnel through the centre, which tells me, firstly, the central midfielders aren't doing their jobs correctly, and I don't really even feel that the centre backs deserve too much criticism here because they should be being protected a lot more. And Kante was doing a good job when he could, but anytime he pushed up, because he's an energetic player and he likes to take the play forward, as soon as he went up, there was no one there to fill in and do the covering for him, and Chelsea were just looking isolated.
Yeah, and I was more especially disappointed in Nemanja Matic's performance, and I feel like he was leaking in a lot of passes, and not just him actually. The whole team. We started off really, really sharp, scored 2 really, really good goals actually, really easy on the eyes. But then, like the whole team just sort of lost their focus, and I feel like that's sort of happened throughout this entire preseason, where in the games we start off really well, or no, we go through a really good 30 minutes or so, and then we just switch off for some reason and we lose our focus. And I remember Willian just literally passed the ball into nobody, and it was intercepted by a Werder Bremen player, and it was a one-on-one situation or something. Fortunately for us, he didn't score, but just things like that were happening way too much. And I think Jason Cundy from Chelsea TV was talking about this. He was really angry about how the Chelsea players looked so sloppy and were just passing the ball to nobody, had no conviction on what they were doing, and at times just looked like it was our first game of preseason, not our last game.
Yeah, I think this is very, very worrying. Because just like you said, I was just about to say, this is not our first game of preseason anymore, and we've been hearing the whole time how fit the players are, how much extra training they're getting, and when we see things like that happening, we just have to question what's going on in Willian's head. And of course, it's just a mistake, but like you said, it wasn't just one mistake. Willian and Matic, for me, were two very underperforming players. I think Willian didn't deserve to stay on as long as he did. Matic, of course, was taken off at half time. I don't really blame him so much for the penalty. I would just say his overall performance was very poor. But I think it is very worrying considering West Ham is so close.
Yeah, and I think had this been a Premier League game, like we won 4-2, we can look at that and say, we had a good game. But I think it would have been a very, very different game because they would have, if we were against West Ham and we're giving away balls like one-on-one situations with Payet or Sacco on the ball, then they're probably going to score 9 times out of 10. And also Matic's, when we gave away the penalty, he would have probably been sent off for that in a Premier League game. And I feel like the 4-2 result, the scoreline is quite deceiving compared to the actual kind of game that we played.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah.
Someone in the comments, Alexander and Barclay, said Remy should leave. Agree. And Remy is an interesting one because I haven't heard his name at all throughout this entire summer. But we still haven't sold him yet. So what do you think is going to happen with him?
Remy was born offside, in my opinion. The guy is just always offside. Look, again, I don't want to be too critical of the guy. Like in our title winning year, he came in a couple of times and looked very promising. He's a very good finisher, and I feel like in the right team and under the right manager, he could be a great, great player. But in saying that, his future does not lie with Chelsea, in my opinion. And Besiktas are rumoured to be very interested in him. Like you said, he hasn't featured in the last few preseason games, so it looks like he's certainly on the way out. I think he's done a good job, and I think Chelsea will certainly make a profit. I believe they brought him in for around 8 million, 10 million pounds. So yeah, I think he's on the way out, and I wish him the best of luck.
Like Remy, yeah. And there was a rumor about a deal with Lukaku where Remy would be a part of that deal, and it sounds like a good way to get rid of him, just to put him as a part of a deal. What do you think on that deal?
I think that was just complete speculation for two reasons. Firstly, swap deals rarely come off, even though it wasn't obviously a direct swap, but it was player and cash. They rarely come off, especially now in modern day football. And on top of that, how much would you say Remy's worth? 10 million, 15 million? If Lukaku's price tag is 75 million, that's not going to make any such dent in negotiations at all. So in my opinion, I think that was just the press messing around. I didn't see any truth in that. But I think regardless, Remy is certainly going to leave Chelsea this summer.
Okay. And just going back to the game against Werder Bremen, in the end of the game, John Terry actually got injured and he was taken off, replaced with Hector. Did you hear anything about John Terry? Any updates regarding him?
I didn't really hear any updates, but I think it was just, obviously a head injury. You've got to take certain precautions, and unless he's got brain damage, which I'm fairly sure he doesn't, and hopefully he doesn't. The guy, he's not going to be out next game unless he's suffering from concussion or something. It is just precaution, and I think it was the right thing to do because it's just pre-season. There was no need to take the risk. So I haven't heard any updates, but I think he should be okay. But for me, it just really reminded us how badly we need defensive reinforcements. Because if Terry was to get a serious injury and it rules him out for, let's say, 6 weeks, we don't really have anyone to come in.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, in this game, we had to have Michael Hector come in the 77th minute. And what do you think Michael Hector's role will be this season? Is he going to go out on loan or stay with us?
I think Chelsea and Conte are kind of, they don't really want to play their hand too quickly here, because if Chelsea were to send out all the players who I believe they're going to send out on loan, Miazga, Hector, then we're going to be left so short that as soon as it comes to negotiations with players like Koulibaly or any potential centre-back we move in for, they're just going to say, well, look, we know that you're desperate for centre-back, so you can pay an extra 10 million. So I think Chelsea need to be a little bit careful not to let go of too many players at once. And I think regardless of negotiations, we need defensive cover, so we can't afford to let go of too many players here. So really, if we see a couple of defenders come in, I see Hector going out and I see Miazga going out, but for the time being, I think Chelsea are going to keep hold of him until we have security. He's an insurance player in my eyes.
Okay. Same with like Miazga and all the young players. Someone who we haven't really mentioned in this entire stream is Thibaut Courtois. And before we talk about his preseason, I just want to get your thoughts on his like kind of Chelsea career as a whole, from our championship winning season and last season. What your thoughts on his performances were?
I think he's been somewhat inconsistent, and I think he's not really been criticised as much as I feel like he should be. Because he's came out with a few comments here, there, and everywhere through his Chelsea career that hasn't really made me too happy. I remember he was off on international duty with Belgium, and he basically had a dig at the Chelsea defence, how he preferred playing for the Belgium defence, and there was a few rumours that he wanted to go back to Madrid, whether that be for Atletico or possibly Real Madrid, and really he didn't really give me the same vibe that Peter Cech gave us. Of course, I do believe it was the right deal for Cech to move on. It wasn't fair to keep both keepers there, but we know he's got tons of potential. We've seen David De Gea overtake him in terms of goalkeepers in the Premier League, who's better, I think, over the last couple of seasons. I don't think he's really pushed on, but I think a reason for that is Chelsea's defensive problems, whether that's been across the back line or the midfield or just the whole defence in general, has been so chopped and changed and topsy-turvy. We've seen, it can't be good for a goalkeeper's development. So I think that could maybe possibly exempt him from some criticism.
Yeah, and the thing with Courtois is, actually, when we first initially got him in that Mourinho season when we won the league, I was actually quite impressed with him. I thought he was really, really very assertive and dominant when the ball came in from crosses or from corner kicks, and he always got the ball, and you knew his hands were just going to get on the ball, and he's just going to keep, that just sounds wrong, but he had a lot of assurance that he was going to get the ball. But in the second season, his confidence just went away. He looked half his height, he looked half his strength, and he looked like an average Premier League goalkeeper, nothing special, not like a Chelsea goalkeeper. And as you said, we saw Petr Cech at Arsenal that season, and a part of me thought, why did we sell him? He's a much better goalkeeper than Courtois being. And I have a lot of Manchester United friends, so it's interesting you mentioned David De Gea, and we always argue, or we used to argue about who's the better goalkeeper. Now there's no argument to be made.
Yeah.
But this preseason, I've actually been quite impressed with Courtois. And I think it was against AC Milan. He pulled off one or two incredible saves. And same goes for actually no, I'm not sure against Werder Bremen. If he was quite, and he made one really really key save early on. I think when the ball he just lifted it. Yeah. So I feel like this preseason he's looked a lot sharper and he's looked a
he's
lot.
very young as well. He's very, very young.
Sorry.
He's very young as well, so he's got a lot of time in his hands.
Yeah, and there are some reports that the old goalkeeping coach, the goalkeeping coach at Chelsea, like changed this summer, I think. And it used to be Petr Cech's mentor who used to be training Courtois, but now it's a completely new person, and Courtois publicly stated that he's much happier now. So that could play a role, and maybe going forward this season he can get back to, because in the past people were comparing him to Neuer as being the best goalkeeper in the world. Now that's no one saying that at all.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said earlier, one of his key attributes was being able to come out and grab the ball. And I'm really glad that you brought up confidence, because I feel like this is one of the major issues with our current Chelsea squad. And we saw with Mourinho's initial spine team, John Terry, Frank Lampard, these were players that weren't essentially confidence players. All of our spine could essentially drag the rest of the team up with them. But in this new look Chelsea team, I feel like a lot of our players are confidence players. So whenever their confidences are low, they just can't seem to get out of that rut. I'm looking at players like Matic. I'm looking at players like even Hazard to an extent. And for me, I just feel like confidence is a major issue. And I think hopefully Conte can instill some confidence back into the players, because we know if they are confident, we can see, like we saw in that title winning year a couple of seasons ago, how good the players can perform.
Yeah. And speaking of like confidence, you mentioned Eden Hazard there. What are your thoughts on him on preseason, and how important do you think he is going to be going forward in the season in the Premier League?
Well, I think he's going to be vital to us. I think as good as Willian was, I would have traded Willian's form to have Hazard back in form last season. I mean, Hazard on form and the rest of the Chelsea team playing per is still a brilliant Chelsea team, in my opinion. I think he's looked very bright so far this pre-season. I was a little bit disappointed to see Oscar still take the penalties. I'd like Hazard to get back to that, just to add to his confidence and add to his goal tally. But yeah, really, I think that Hazard can compensate. If we end up not getting Lukaku or a high caliber striker, I think Hazard can really contribute to the goals that we might be lacking. And even if Conte ends up playing him up front alongside Diego Costa, I think that could be a very interesting partnership, because Hazard did play centre forward for Lille, his previous club before Chelsea. And he's, let's be realistic, he might not be at Chelsea for the next 3 years. We're going to have this year, and if we're very lucky the year after out of Hazard, we need to get the most goals out of him we possibly can. So I don't think it's beyond possibility pushing him up there, but certainly he's looking back to his best.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him playing as a striker, because my next question was going to be, what position do you think he plays best in? His left wing role, as a central midfielder, or as a striker? And where would you like to see him this season?
I think he plays best centrally, because when he's playing central, he can either go left or right, and I think that just makes it even worse for defenders to defend against. And I think he plays best in a free role. I remember he played in Cam a couple of seasons ago maybe, and he was given a complete free role, and he was just everywhere on the pitch. And I think that in the striker role, strikers tend to be given a free role in general, because they're not really expected to come back and defend or anything. So I feel like that could work in his favour. If he's told to drop off deep, get the ball, bring it forward, and play it through to Costa, and maybe play as maybe a 4-4-1-1 formation, as Hazard maybe in a centre forward role that drifts into a striker, I think that could potentially work. I think the sky's the limit for Hazard. Whatever he sets his eyes to attacking wise, I feel like he could achieve it. And I feel like he knows best, Conte knows best, but certainly for me, centrally and a free role, whether that be in cam or striker, could be very good for him.
And maybe a bit too early to ask you, but who would be your prediction for player of the season this year?
I'd like to say it's between Kante and Hazard, and I hope it's Hazard, believe it or not. I think it would be great. I think he said himself, if he ever leaves Chelsea, or when he leaves Chelsea, he wants to leave as a great player. So, of course, I never want him to leave Chelsea. So if he has 3 more per seasons and stays, then great. But hopefully he has a great season next year. And yeah, I'd say he'll get Player of the Year award.
Player of the Year, okay. And just thoughts on Willian in the season ahead? whether
if he
he's going to
can.
reach the heights. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that rotation's going to come into play. So if we can get some players rotating like Cuadrado, because we know Conte's a fan of him, and if Willian really buys into this formation and spirit, I feel like he could be very vital for Chelsea. But he's just going to need to recover that form.
Okay. Well, this has been a long live stream. But before we go, there's something that I really wanted to mention. Yes, actually, I remember. The formations. We've been messing around with the 4-4-2 or a 4-2-4 and a 4-2-3-1 throughout this entire preseason. What do you think our formation will be against West Ham when the Premier League kicks off?
Okay, I'm going to predict the whole lineup here, all right? We're going to play 4-4-2. Okay. We're going to see Costa and Traore up front. We're going to see Willian and Hazard on the wings. We're going to see Fabregas and Oscar in the midfield. Or maybe Fabregas and Kante. I don't know. Maybe Oscar and Kante. And then a backline of Ivanovic, Azpilicueta, John Terry, Gary Cahill, and Juan Nets, I'd say. But I can see that formation changing throughout the season, certainly.
Okay, so you go with a 4-4-2 formation. Yeah, we are playing at home, so maybe that is more likely. In terms of the midfield, do you think it would be probable, if we do play a 4-4-2 throughout the season, do you think we're going to see much of a Fabregas-Oscar pairing? Because they're both quite attack-minded players, and we know Conte likes to have a stable defense and like a player to break up the play in the middle.
I feel like Kante is going to feature a lot for Chelsea, and if they're only playing two midfielders, I feel like Kante is almost guaranteed a spot unless he's injured or looking fatigued. And I don't think I've ever seen Kante look fatigued at all. So I think he's always going to be in the team. So really, that's just going to leave one space beside, unless they play what we played today, a 4-1-4-1. So really, unless Kante's utilized in that one guarding the back four. I can't really see much of a partnership unless it's off the bench. And I feel like off the bench doesn't really do players justice because it doesn't give them enough time to really get to the flow of things,
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I think my predicted lineup would be I would actually go with a 4-2-3-1 lineup because I just feel like, this is our last preseason game and he decided to go with a 4-2-3 or a 4-3-3 or some kind of variation of that. And I just feel like, especially with Batshuayi not hitting his form yet, having one striker up top fits us a lot better. My predicted lineup would be Courtois in goal, Azpilicueta, Cahill, Terry, and Ivanovic in the defense. And the two defensive midfield roles, I'll have Matic and Conte. Actually, I think it's the exact same lineup as that we did against Werder Bremen. We'd have Hazard on the left, Willian on the right, Oscar in the middle, and then Diego Costa up top. That would be my predicted lineup.
Sounds good, man. Just before we go, I have a question for you, and I have a question for all the viewers as well, if you would be so kind as to drop a comment below. It's a little bit of a hypothetical here, but it's a fun one, all right? Would you, at this moment, trade everything? So Conte, all the players we've signed, and take Mourinho back, and all of the players he signed for Man United. So Zlatan, Pogba, Bailey, and Jose stays at Chelsea right now. But Conte and all of the players we've signed goes to United.
Yeah. For me, that's quite obvious. I mean, they signed Pogba. Just like I would sell everything we have just for like Pogba and Mourinho probably. Just because actually I think Manchester United we'll talk more about other teams and the Premier League in our next live stream hopefully. But just a quick word on Manchester United. I feel like they are a really really serious side to consider in the title challenge, especially the signings that they've made. Eric Bailey looks like a beast. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he's Ibrahimovic. Pogba is Pogba. Mkhitaryan looks like he's incredibly skillful.
Building a really good spine at United. We've seen him doing it at Chelsea before. But for me, Jose Mourinho, he does this at every club he goes. He's going to spend 1 year building Manchester United into the best club. He's going to spend the next year winning everything he possibly can. And he's going to spend the third year destroying everything. So
hopefully that's the case this time around. Let's see what people are saying here. One person says, I wouldn't. Keith Jennings, please explain your reasoning for why you wouldn't. Andre Davis says, of course. So I guess, fans are split on this. What would you do, actually?
I think it's very easy to go with swap places now because every single player United have signed besides Bailey, including Mourinho himself, they're all very marquee names. So I think as a fan base, we're all drawn to the marquee name. But essentially, I think I am happy with Conte. If you analyze player by player, I'm happy with Conte over Mourinho at the moment. I'm happy with where we are. I'm happy with the signing of Conte. I think he suits us better. As nice as Pogba would be, I know Pogba would be great. And I think Zlatan is only going to be good for a couple of years. So I'm happy with where we are, although I prefer not to answer that question.
Now, what's interesting is the players that Manchester United signed are like most of them would actually be a perfect signing for Chelsea because we need a center back. Eric Bailey would be a great player for us. We needed a kind of midfielder, like a box-to-box midfielder who can kind of defend but also go forward, like Conte. They got Pogba. We needed a world-class striker. Ibrahimovic is a bit old. He is aging, but he is still probably one of the best strikers on the planet right now.
Yeah, and they got
And
Mkhitaryan as well.
yeah, Mkhitaryan as well. It's interesting to see how Mourinho is building his team. But yeah, I think that is it for today. This has been a lot longer than we both anticipated, about 70 minutes in total. So thanks for joining me. Guys, as always, as I said in the beginning, his link, Chelsea transfers, will be linked in the description down below. Be sure to go check him out if you're interested in Chelsea or any transfer rumors or news alongside my channel as well. We will hopefully be doing another live stream later this week, right?
Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this one as well. I've certainly enjoyed it myself.
Yep, and just thanks for watching. And do you want to say any last words before we go?
Keep the blue flag flying high. Peace, guys.
Yes. See you guys. Bye.